Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now Vice President of Football and Research at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. We've got our producer, Justin Stein, on the controls, and we are ready to dive into our Super Bowl recap. Aaron, I got to ask you, you were there in the flesh. What was the game like? What were your takeaways being there in Miami?
In case people didn't realize it from the tweets that people were putting out and messages, the Kansas City fans seemed to definitely outnumber the San Francisco fans and were louder. I don't know whether that just means it's a fan base that travels better or it's a fan base that was more interested in the Miami weather because it's colder in Kansas City than it is in San Francisco. Or
I think that was audible on TV also. I would say that the Kansas City fans seem to have more oomph.
I mean, when they did the national anthem and they ended with the home of the brave, and in Kansas City, they always go the home of the Chiefs, and people went kind of nuts. So, I mean, that was the number one thing from being there as opposed to watching on TV. Although, like you said, I guess it came through on TV as well. Most of the scoring happened in the end zone on the opposite side of the stadium away from me. The auxiliary press box was in the end zone on the opposite side of where where Kansas City scored its last two touchdowns to take a lead. So, it was an exciting game. I think I was a little stunned by how mediocre the Kansas City offense was for three quarters. And then they woke up just like they had for the first couple of playoff games. I mean, that effect of Kansas City starting slow was a bit exaggerated in the AFC Championship game, because in the AFC Championship game, it was basically one bad drive. It just so happened that Tennessee scored on its first two drives. But obviously in the Houston game, they started very, very slow. And in this game, I mean, Mahomes was missing guys. I don't know whether it was the yips or just random variation, but he was missing even short passes to running backs early on in the game. But once they got their stuff going and the San Francisco pass rush slowed down a little bit in the fourth quarter, we got the Kansas City offense that we know and love, and they won the game.
Yeah, well, that's a great place to start right there, is with that Kansas City pass protection against the San Francisco defensive line. I think that was absolutely dominated by San Francisco. Certainly, in the fourth quarter, we saw the comeback. But over the course of the game, we saw 46 Mahomes dropbacks, 21 were hurries or sacks. So they were getting after him there. And I think it just goes to show you how much more impressive the performance by Mahomes and by Andy Reid really was out there. Also take into account that Mecole Hardman was injured for part of the game. His snap count was down a little bit compared to average, and not a lot of effectiveness when he was on the field. So, between those two things, somehow they found a way, moving him around, covering things up. Mahomes actually finished with 7.5 yards per attempt when pressured in this game. So it's amazing how we're so used to seeing him just be, Marino out there, 1984. And how different it looked. Oh, my God, he missed a couple of passes. What's going on? I would never say that he was getting outplayed by Jimmy Garoppolo, even no matter what numbers you want to put out there for the first three quarters. But certainly it was not what we're used to seeing from him.
The misses to running backs really stood out to me, though, because those are passes that you should connect on. I actually thought the Kansas City pass protection was reasonably good in the first quarter, and then it just started to disintegrate.
So I thought right away, I mean, first drive of the game, I thought they had really two pressures that ended that first drive. And I think throughout in the run game, it wasn't like they were getting dominated, but in the pass game, they had a real problem there doing things up front. To your point, I agree. The stuff that Mahomes was doing, it wasn't necessarily on the plays when he was pressured, but I think the cumulative effect of playing just with the line of scrimmage set back, I think really took his toll on him. The example that stood out for me was definitely the interception of Fred Warner, which was zone coverage, a very un-Mahomes-like throw, just a bad decision trying to force the ball in there like that.
Yeah, I think that one was third quarter. And by that point, the San Francisco pass rush was really winning. And you also noticed as the game went along, they started to roll Mahomes out to the right constantly to get him away from the Nick Bosa on Eric Fisher matchup.
Yep, they were moving him around a ton. and a lot of horizontal runs and things like that. That's always going to be a part of their offense. But I mean, even on those, I remember one sweep, jet sweep pass where they throw the little touch pass to Tyreek Hill, and he had to bubble backwards because the line of scrimmage was getting pushed so far back there. So that up front matchup was exactly what we expected. But I guess at the end of the day, it was Mahomes overcoming on that one.
Yeah, Mahomes. I mean, the fourth quarter definitely. Mahomes, he was awesome. I mean, what do you think of the choice for him for MVP? I do like the choice of him as MVP over Damian Williams. I tweeted in the third quarter that I thought that despite the lack of standard statistics, right, he only had one sack, which was the strip sack. I thought Nick Bosa was the MVP through three quarters. But I think because Damian Williams got so many of his yards on that last run when the game was pretty much decided, and he got a touchdown on that last run when the game was pretty much decided, I still like the choice of Mahomes as MVP.
My second choice for MVP would be Chris Jones.
Yeah, Chris Jones.
I think at the end of the day, it's got to be Mahomes. Just, I mean, with what we've seen, I understand, and it's a little bit why the MVP award. Maybe they should divide out, like a quarterback MVP award and a non-quarterback MVP award or something like that. But I thought Chris Jones was good. Pennell also on the defensive front did a good job. Those guys combined for the pressure that caused Garoppolo's pick, or his first pick, I should say, which was really gross looking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of sort of having separate awards for the season. I do think that for a single game, you can give the MVP award to a non-quarterback and feel like it still makes sense sometimes. For a full season, you can't. For a full season, the MVP is always going to be a quarterback. But if you ask me who was more responsible for San Francisco having a lead in that game through three quarters, Jimmy Garoppolo or Nick Bosa, I think the answer was Nick Bosa.
Yeah, that's not even close. Like I said, throw Fred Warner into the conversation, but I think what Bosa was doing up front was definitely, he's just unbelievable. I put a 7, talking about just the football rookie handbook. We just finished putting the finishing touches on the 2020 football rookie handbook this year. I wrote his report for the book last year. I gave him a 7.0 grade. That's an all pro, like perennial Pro Bowler type grade. Is it, transcendent talent. And I think I was low on him at 7.0 based on the way he performed throughout the season. He was just absolutely ridiculous, and it kept going throughout this game. Dominant in the run game, dominant in the pass game, just resetting the line of scrimmage on every play, making the Chiefs not look like they need to re-sign Eric Fisher, quite honestly.
I guess the question is, does Nick Bosa get better from here? Is this an issue where he just happened to show up in the NFL as good as he's going to be?
I do think he's as polished as a player I've ever seen.
Does he actually get better from this, in which case he becomes perennial defensive player of the year candidate? I mean, if he stays at this level, he's probably a perennial defensive player of the year candidate. So I don't know how much better he can get.
Well, it's not exactly a twin study, but we have seen Joey Bosa in the NFL for a few years. He's been consistently very good. I think you could make the argument that Nick Bosa had a better year this year than Joey Bosa's ever had.
I think that's true. I don't know how much that's dependent on the players around them, although Joey Bosa does have Ingram on the other side. So it's not like he's playing on a defensive line where he's the only danger.
All right, let's circle back. So we talked a little bit about the Kansas City, the pass protection. Early on for San Francisco, it was 21 personnel. It was tight splits. It was horizontal running, including Deebo Samuel, Kittle on the play action. I thought the genius thing, everybody's criticized Kyle Shanahan. How about the genius thing that he did, limiting Kansas City to 3 first-half possessions? I thought that was pretty impressive work. We'll get to the end of the first half and all of that kind of stuff. But the strategy to play possession and really keep the ball away from Mahomes, I think, is a good one. This is, I think, one of the only ways you can compete with Mahomes at his peak, with Peyton Manning at his peak, et cetera. And we've seen this strategy work before. I thought that was really impressive stuff. It was when they stalled was when they went pass. Literally on their first drive stalled on a sequence that was pass. They got a free play, which was a pass, and then they passed again on 3rd and 5. And that was their, I guess, 4 and out. So I don't know. What did you think of San Francisco? Any positives that you found from Kyle Shanahan and what they were doing early on to kind of seemingly take control of the game?
See, I'm less of enamored with the idea of shortening the game by having fewer possessions. Not that I think it was a bad decision. I think that that's something you try to do in general when you're an underdog. And San Francisco, we may have felt they were a slight underdog in this game, but I don't think that they necessarily had to. The reason why you shorten the game and have fewer possessions is because you want a larger chance that a random bounce of the ball or a random good play will help you if you're the underdog. And I don't think San Francisco was very much of an underdog. So I honestly, as long as their offense was playing well, I don't think it matters as long as they were doing well on their possessions. They didn't necessarily have to limit Mahomes that much. It's interesting, the idea of them going away from the run to the pass, because normally we favor the pass, right? But given the matchup between this offense and that defense, their offense was picking up yards in these huge chunks in the running game.
So it's interesting. We've talked a lot about how offense is more stable than defense. I think if either of us had the opportunity, we would think about building through the passing game primarily, and then build out the rest of the team from there. So I wonder if it's not just a favorite versus underdog thing, and maybe there's something a little bit to, man, they've got Patrick Mahomes. We are built to be a defensive team. We'd rather be built to be an offensive team, but we are what we are. Just like, like you said, we're going to run the ball because it's better for us. Maybe there's something to it there where you give a little bit of an extra nod to shortening the game because defense is that random. And Patrick Mahomes, the more possessions he gets, the more he's going to give you the opportunity to show that he's Patrick Mahomes.
I guess you would hope that your own offense, the more possessions it gets. I mean, they had a top 10 offense, and the Kansas City defense is not as good as the San Francisco defense. So I guess you want to go in hoping your offense is going to keep up with them.
Okay, and that's the perfect segue to actually the decision. Let's just skip straight to the end of that first half and that decision that not taking the timeout when you had 1:45 on the clock, allowing Kansas City to punt it. You get the ball back. They were on their own end. It was a touchback, but they let it go down to a minute with the 3 timeouts left. They ran it 2 times to start off there. The big thing that really I think is what Shanahan missed in this situation is I don't think he's wrong to not want to give the ball back to Mahomes. If you want to either not take that first timeout or start off with a running play on your drive, I can understand the argument for that and getting it down closer to a minute so that you're not getting it back to Mahomes. The problem is, and this goes back to what you were just saying, it's not like this was just a game where there's Mahomes on that side of the field and you have nothing. They had to feel like they had a pretty good matchup against the Kansas City defense. And at this point in the game, the fear of giving the ball to Mahomes actually got in the way of him realizing that he had a good offensive matchup against the Kansas City defense, and there was no reason for them to not try to move the ball there.
Yeah, I favor being aggressive. You've got the ball. You've got, 1 minute and 40 seconds. If you take the timeout after Kansas City fails on 3rd and 14, you've got plenty of time there. And also, the funny thing is, Kansas City's offense had been playing rather conservative. Kansas City had been throwing a lot of short passes. They really avoided throwing deep in the first half.
I don't think they could protect.
I mean, that 3rd and 14 was a 1-yard pass to Damian Williams. So even if you do, you take the timeout, you get the ball back with 1:40, you fail, maybe Kansas City then gets the ball back with a minute left. How much confidence do you have? You're playing defensively pretty well against them. It's not necessarily that they're going to go march downfield and score on you automatically.
Right. I understand you're playing the Chiefs and you want to play them maybe differently and limit their possessions. But what Shanahan actually did there was limit his own possessions. He had an opportunity to have the last possession of that half and make something out of it. Now, you end up getting into the whole pass interference thing. That's a whole different story.
Right. They did actually, after they had the 20-yard to Jeff Wilson, they did actually get in position to score with that huge long play to Kittle, except that they called Kittle for pushing off on what I thought was, he did have arm extension, but they let that go sometimes. It was one of those plays that goes either way. It's hard to sort of criticize.
You saw him extend the arm. It could go either way. It's iffy. You're not going to call it a bad call. They're not going to overturn the call in that sort of a situation. But yeah, I get you on there. It was a great throw.
I don't know if they had not called it. If on review they would have added it, I don't know if they would have added it on review.
No.
I think it was
you can't overturn that either way.
Yeah,
that's an on the field one. I'm with you there. All right, let's take a quick break right now. We'll come in with a word about the 2020 SIS Football Rookie Handbook, and then we'll come back and round out our conversation. Sports Info Solutions brings you the second annual edition of the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, with scouting reports and statistical breakdowns on over 280 college football players who are likely to be drafted or signed as rookie free agents in 2020. New features this year include unique and informative NFL team pages, research deep dives by the SIS R&D team, and, for the first time ever, the NCAA version of the SIS flagship football statistic, Total Points. At Sports Info Solutions, we collect and analyze college football players like it has never been done before. Whether you're a film junkie, an aspiring analyst, or just looking for the most comprehensive information on what your NFL team's rookies did while they were playing college football, this book has what you are looking for and more. Michael Lombardi, former NFL general manager and three-time Super Bowl winner, said, "This book is the closest fans will get to reading real NFL scouts reports, because it is detailed reporting with a complete understanding of what it takes to play in the NFL. Well done." John Park, the manager of research and strategy for the Indianapolis Colts, said, "Scouts matter because not everything that counts can be counted, and relevant data matters since not everything that can be counted counts. With that said, SIS creates relevant football data that matters." Please check out the SIS Football Rookie Handbook. It is available wherever you get books. You can get it on acta.com, ACTA.com. You can get it on Amazon.com, or you can find it at Barnes & Noble. That's the SIS Football Rookie Handbook, comprehensive scouting and analytics guide, all of the 2020 NFL draft prospects, brought to you by Sports Info Solutions. All right, coming right back. Let's talk a little bit about the Kansas City offense and what they did in this game a little bit more. We talked about their pressure situation. We had expected that they might try to move their receivers around to keep Tyreek Hill away from Richard Sherman. We didn't see that at all in this game. They weren't afraid of Richard Sherman. He had a few targets. They had a few completions against him. What did you make of that sort of strategy?
It was a couple of short things. I think Sherman still had a good game. He just had one big mistake when Watkins put a move on him, and what was it, like 38 yards or something.
Right.
I don't think that Sherman had like a terrible game. But no, I early on I was like, oh, they don't seem to be throwing to that side. But they weren't throwing deep very much at all. They were throwing in the middle a lot. They threw left a lot, but when they went right, and they were not afraid of Sherman.
One other matchup that we had talked about last week that I had brought up based on some research by Nate Weller, the Chiefs, when they had isolated Kelsey on the 3x1, 2x1, whenever he was the isolated receiver on one side with the other guys on the other side, they had been a much better offense this year. We saw the complete opposite of this game. Robert Saleh was ready for it. With Kelsey isolated, he had negative 0.25 expected points added throughout the game. Negative 0.25 per play, so just a 44% positive percent, 3.7 yards per play. Whereas without him isolated, they were much better. Positive play percent up to 54%, 8.4 yards per play. So it was actually the complete reverse in that one. It looked like the Niners scheme was ready to handle Kelsey in that situation, but it was the other stuff that Kansas City did that ended up being more effective.
Yeah, obviously a big play with Kelsey that's not in Kelsey's standard stats, but is the defensive pass interference that he earned in the end zone in the middle of the fourth quarter that led to the 1-yard touchdown to him that made it 20-17. That was a huge play.
Right, and I should be clear. I'm not criticizing Kelsey's performance.
No, Kelsey had a good game. It's just right. It was the way he did. It was the formations that he came out of were different than expected.
Yep, and he was huge in this game. Okay, let's talk about decision-making. The Chiefs had two big fourth down decisions in this one, added win probability on those. I saw Scott Spratt writing a little bit about the game-winning chance that the Chiefs were able to create there. Do you have any reactions to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the decisions that Andy Reid made in this game and not as big a fan of the decisions that Kyle Shanahan made. I thought for Andy Reid to go for it, he went for it on 2 4th-and-1s. I think those were both good decisions, and they both were successful. So, I mean, you get to pat yourself on the back.
Successful or not successful, I think they're no-brainers. Based on the SIS win probability model, Down by 3, end of the first quarter, 4th and 1 at the 5. That was 4.5 percentage points of win probability. And then up by 4 with 11 minutes to go in the second quarter, 4th and 1 at the 19, another 2 percentage points of win probability. So you're adding 6.5 percentage points of win probability. If it works, it doesn't work, I don't care. You got to take those margins.
When he originally brought in the field goal team for that 4th and 1 for the 5, I was freaking out.
Livid, yeah.
Then he took them out and brought in the regular team, and they ran that weird little fullback spinny play where they then snapped it directly to Damian Williams. You
don't think you could do that move?
That was a good move. To spin like that and then concentrate on getting the snap and going forward is pretty good. The third quarter, it's the 4th and 2 on the first San Francisco drive, 4th and 2 from the Kansas City 24, where Shanahan settled for the 42-yard field goal. And I think that, I think that their chances of converting that, especially given how strong their run game is, still suggests that it would have been a good idea to go for it in that situation.
Yeah, our model too, I understand the case against it in that situation, but I do hope that as we approach towards this brighter future that you helped create, starting 20 or so years ago, we can finally get to a world where that becomes the norm with that sort of a decision. People don't realize that the down by 4 2-point conversion decision is a totally different situation than this, but down by 4, if you score a touchdown, the intuitive thing is to kick the extra point so that you can get into a field goal game. But there's actually a lot of research that says that's a real go for 2 situation. You can put yourself in a chance to win the game.
It's the same as the down by 8. It's the goal to win the game, not to get to overtime. They did that. Kansas City did that with the Kelsey touchdown. They did kick the extra point to go down by 3, but it's really then there was a 4th and 5, but the 4th and 5, San Francisco on their own 25 in the third quarter. I kind of understand punting in that situation. It is 4th and 5 on your own 25. You're giving the ball to Kansas City. If you punt there, if you don't punt there, you're giving it to them in field goal range to tie the game. So that one I do understand.
Yeah, I didn't look at what our model said about that situation. That one would surprise me too if that was a go. If it is a go based on the numbers, it's a slight go, and I'm
right. And I understand going old school on that one.
Yep. I would recommend going old. I'll take it a step further and say I'd recommend it in that situation.
It was the 3rd and 5, by the way. Kansas City blitzed. They had real success in this game blitzing on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long. That's when they really got to Garoppolo with their pass rush.
Yeah, towards the end of the game, especially when it became a drop-back game for him at the end, it looked like he had no idea how to decipher Spags' coverages, all that combination stuff he does back there. And Spags was bringing the heat. It wasn't just the usual, the zone blitz, and, it ends up being 4 guys coming, but we keep our numbers. He was bringing 5 and 6. So it was good stuff.
Yeah, he brought the blitz, and San Francisco couldn't handle it.
Spags, a guy that I worked with briefly in New Orleans, but a good man, and I'm happy to see him get the win there. Clearly got a knack for Super Bowl game planning.
This is Spags' 2nd or 3rd ring. Was he in the?
I think he was in both Giant
Was
rings.
He both Giants teams? No, he was in St. Louis in 2011. He's got 1 ring from 2007, and he's got this one.
Not bad. I'll take 2 rings any day. Okay, sticking on those 4th down conversions. On one of them, we saw an option, and we actually saw a few options from Mahomes.
I love option on 4th down. Love it.
I think he ran 3 separate options at different points in the game, but really interesting to see him getting work on the move there. He kept one for the touchdown. He pitched one, I think, for a 4th down conversion. So using those in high leverage situations, they saw something there that they wanted to do. And it's for all that we think of Mahomes and the amount that they want to keep him from getting hit and keeping it a drop back game. This was the Super Bowl, and he took some mean hits in this game that you'd never want to see Pat Mahomes take in the regular season. But I love the strategy getting him going.
No tomorrow, baby. You can take those hits because there's no tomorrow. You wake up, you've got 6 months to recover.
And a good reminder that Pat Mahomes was the top player in total points per game this year. And he certainly proved it in the 4th quarter of this one. One underrated thought about Mahomes, he threw a ball to Damian Williams in the end zone in the 2nd quarter that would have put them up 14-3, but it seemed like Damian Williams just couldn't find the ball in the air. Imagine the difference in kind of the narrative here. If that's a 14-3 game at that point.
And it looked like a little bit of a hold, but then when you go back and look on the replay, there's no hold. Williams just kind of holds up a little bit on his own.
Yeah, he didn't find the ball for whatever reason. It was interesting.
Trying to remember where that was.
Could have made for I think in the second quarter. Could have made for second quarter would have made a really different narrative.
Yes, it was 1st and 10 from the San Francisco 16 with 10 and a half minutes left.
And they ended up kicking the field goal there, I think, to make it just 10-3, and then it gets tied up. But that could have been a different game at that point.
Yeah, and Juszczyk with the touchdown that made it 10-10. We should point out he had a really good game. Deebo Samuel is interesting. Deebo Samuel had negative receiving value by our numbers because he had a couple of those like screen passes where he lost yardage, but his rushing value was fantastic. They asked him after the game how he felt about setting a Super Bowl record for rushing yards by a receiver. He was sort of nonplussed. We didn't win, I mean, I yay record, but
yeah, not a great question to use there. Okay, and then I also wanted to talk about Daniel Sorensen. We talked about him a little bit in terms of the matchup in here, and I thought you mentioned Juszczyk, his touchdown. Sorensen was on that play. An early first down to Kittle. Sorensen's on that play. The pass interference at the end of the first half, actually Sorensen drew the penalty against Kittle on that play, but another one where he was very close to being victimized. I thought the Shanahan, to give him more praise, did a good job of identifying that matchup, and they did a good job of going after that. Some success, but obviously not enough at the end of the day.
A lot of Kansas City's quality defense against tight ends this year was Juan Thornhill, and they missed Juan Thornhill in this game. Even though Kittle didn't come out with great numbers because of that pass interference canceling out that huge game. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will say, Sorensen, they did a good job of identifying where Sorensen was a weakness, but still, Kittle did not have a huge game. He only caught 4 for 7 for 36 yards. The one, obviously it's a much bigger game if you include that play that got canceled by OPI, but he committed the OPI, so that play doesn't count. So Kittle actually, I believe, was in last place among receivers and tight ends in DYAR for this game. He's open, for example, on 2nd and 5 in the fourth quarter when San Francisco's up 20-17. He's open, and that's when the ball gets knocked down by Chris Jones, so the ball doesn't get to him. And then he's
knockdown. They had him against a defensive lineman, right?
Third down. He's open. Third down, I believe. Third down is third down, he was open also, but it was second down that he was covered by Terrell Suggs. And then third down, he's also open, but Garoppolo threw to Kendrick Bourne, I think, instead.
And then, this is an analytics podcast at its core, and we've sometimes have talked about momentum on here and how momentum isn't something that you can really prove, or we haven't yet through statistics at least. But do you give any credence just to the confidence change? It felt like watching the game, like there was a really big difference from both teams after that 3rd and 15 completion by the Chiefs. To that point, it really felt like the confidence level of the Niners was higher. And then from that point forward, it seemed like they knew that they didn't have an answer for what Mahomes was going to do. You give any credence to the argument for momentum based on that one?
I mean, here's the problem with the argument for momentum is that it's an argument that you can only make in the past. If something different had happened, we wouldn't have said, wow, isn't it surprising how the momentum felt like it shifted there, but then San Francisco converted and won the game? Like, you never say that. You never go back and are like, well, the momentum shifted on this play, but then it turned out that, other team did well.
What if we subbed out the word confidence for momentum? And we said, oh, that was a real confidence builder, or that was I really felt a loss of confidence after that play.
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like professional athletes have a lot of confidence in themselves, even when losing. I mean, it's right. Kansas City had to have plenty of confidence in itself to come back, even though they were losing, right? It looked like San Francisco had all the momentum or confidence or whatever you'd like to call it when they were up 20-10, and Kansas City came back on them anyway. So, I mean, that's the problem. It's not that confidence doesn't exist. It's that we really can only use it as an explanation in the past. It doesn't work as an explanation for future, because when you talk about it for the future,
you can't predict that.
It's 50-50. It's not a predictive thing at all.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Until we find a way that we can prove that there's some usefulness to the idea of momentum, or even that it really actually exists.
We talk about the confidence change, the momentum change based on a big play. We never talk about the confidence or momentum change that caused that big play, right? Because you didn't know that there was a confidence change before the big play just kind of happens, right? So I really think that the confidence argument only works as a past tense argument.
I can't say that I've won this argument. All right. One more thing.
Especially, by the way, I'll add that when they passed Tyreek Hill on the 2nd and 15 and that was overturned, like theoretically that should have been a loss of confidence, right? Because there's a big play that they don't get. And then the next play is the 3rd and 15 that goes for 44 yards.
So on that, we saw an overturn there, but very cleanly officiated game. Overall, no big complaints coming out of this one. No big controversies, thank God. The one,
I saw some complaints from fans about their team, but I didn't see any complaints from neutral fans at all about the officiating in this game.
Yeah, I think fans of their team will always have something to complain about, especially if they've had a couple beverages. But what I would say in this one, why no pylon cam? This is a Super Bowl. We can't have a pylon cam to get that goal line play to find out if that was a touchdown or not.
I think the Damian Williams thing happened above the pylon, and therefore the pylon cam probably didn't catch it.
Interesting. Is that what's going on?
Because there's no camera that points up from the pylon. It points across from the pylon.
I guess they didn't think of everything.
No, they did. There's one camera in the pylon, not two cameras in the pylon.
I think that kind of gets us through the whole game. It was I think everything we looked for in the matchup going into the game. We said if it was close, we could see it going either way, and it certainly was close and could have gone either way.
Spinning it forward, I said this on the Twitter. I think that, in part because TV shows know what gets eyeballs and websites know what gets clicks, and the word dynasty gets a lot of clicks and a lot of eyeballs. And because of that, we've been, like so much of the press has been jumping to the can Kansas City build a dynasty? Mm-hmm. And my feeling is, let's let Kansas City fans enjoy this one and maybe talk a little bit about next year, because we're talking about next year for all teams. But, will Kansas City be a competitive team for all of Patrick Mahomes' career? I mean, you would like to think so, but even Indianapolis had losing seasons with Peyton Manning at quarterback, and obviously New Orleans had losing seasons with Drew Brees at quarterback. Do we have to suddenly proclaim them as a likely dynasty? I mean, let's let teams win 2 of them before we start talking about that. What we had is a really good year here by a really good team that's actually had 2 really good years here and looks like they're going to be really good in the near future too. And I don't think, I know it gets the eyeballs and it gets the clicks, but it's a little too early to be talking dynasty.
I think we should all remember how close we were to praising Kyle Shanahan's genius and how can Jimmy Garoppolo have a dynasty over the next few years, and can Mahomes win the big one? And right. We were really close to having that conversation and that overreaction as well. So I couldn't agree with you more. All right. We want to thank all of our listeners for listening for their Super Bowl recap. Please help spread the word about the Off the Charts Football Podcast by subscribing, rating, writing reviews. You can hit us up on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS and at FB Outsiders. And keep your eyes open. The 2020 Football Rookie Handbook by Sports Info Solutions will be on the bookshelves by the end of the month. By the time the combine is here, you will have it, all of the information you need as you watch a bunch of guys run 40-yard dashes and jump broad jumps and do all those other kinds of activities that don't really correlate with football talent as much as playing football.
As much as we want to believe. Now doing them in prime time.
But as you watch them in their underwear Olympics, you can have the Football Rookie Handbook with you.
Tell you how they actually played football in college this year, actual football play.
Yes. So the Rookie Handbook, we've got all the scouting reports in there, over 280 players this year, as well as the analytical date breakdowns, including NFL team pages breaking down all 32 teams, a new feature for this year. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.